We're here at the Warsaw Security Forum, and my next guest is Benjamin Haddad, the Minister for Europe from France. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you know, here at the Warsaw Security Forum, probably one of the top topics is the situation, the war in Ukraine.
Right.
Currently, we see a bad situation for Ukraine. We see the big tensions on the Eastern Front. We see Ukraine having a little slice of Russia, but we still have no agreement on long-range weapons. How do you think the rest of this year is going to go for Ukraine?
First, let's start with the basics. What's happening in Ukraine is an issue for the security of all Europeans. And this is what I was here to say earlier on a panel at the Warsaw Security Forum. Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and sovereignty, but they're also fighting for our European values, but also for our security. They're defending Europeans against Russian aggression. And this is why we have a responsibility to defend our interests and help Ukrainians defend their freedom and win this war. That means providing them all the weapons that they need to defend themselves. We've done so in the last 2.5 years with the tanks, the weapons, with the Caesar cannons that France gives, long-range missiles. And we have to go further to change the situation on the ground. And then we have to help them in other aspects, whether it's economic support, whether it's the path towards European accession that Ukrainians are fighting for, and defining robust security guarantees for Ukraine. Once again, you know, this is a long-term battle, and it's very important for us not to lose the focus and not to lose the unity at the European and the transatlantic level that we've been able to sustain so far since the beginning of Russian aggression.
I spoke with Garry Kasparov earlier today, and he's actually very frustrated here at the Warsaw Security Forum. He believes that this is a political decision, ultimately, how fast and at what pace we want to end this war. And if it's true, as you say, that Ukraine is fighting this war for the rest of Europe, then it should be in our interest to get this war over as soon as possible. In France, is there a fear that a Russian defeat could be somehow catastrophic?
You heard what President Macron said a few months ago. He said it very clearly that for too long, we've set red lines on Ukrainians and on ourselves when helping Ukrainians. We said, we'll never give weapons, and then we started giving weapons. We said, we'll never give tanks, and we'll start giving tanks. We'll never give jets, we give jets. And it's true that we waited too long, while Russia has set no such red line for itself. So yes, indeed, let's stay united. I want us to look at the glass half full as well, because we're still here talking about how we can help Ukraine. I was very worried after February 24th, 2022, that we'd be there for a couple months, and then afterwards we would do what we've always done before, in 2008, 2014, and go back to negotiations, which ended up being just a form of submission. I think it's important that we keep the course and that we stay focused in the long run.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz is reported to be considering making a phone call to Vladimir Putin. Is this a good decision at this point in the war, or do we stand staunchly by Ukraine?
You know that President Macron in France and others have always been very clear. I mean, we've tried diplomacy. The president was actually very courageous in going to Kyiv and Moscow before the beginning of the war, keeping this line open with the Russian president. He's the one who chose to close the door to diplomacy. He's the one who chose war. So once again, the moment that Ukrainians decide if they want a negotiation and under which terms is their decision. In the meantime, once again, let's give them the means to regain their territory and fight and support them.
The use of long-range weapons, I know this isn't your direct area, but what is the reason that France and the United Kingdom don't want to give the permission to use Storm Shadow missiles on targets in Russia, deeper in Russia, which are basically where all the attacks on Ukraine are originating?
Well, first, I want to say that France and the United Kingdom have been the first countries to give Ukrainians long-range missiles, as you know, that are necessary to be able to strike, and especially strike targets from which Russia is sending weapons and missiles directly to target infrastructure in Ukraine, sometimes civilian infrastructure. I think these are discussions that need to be had even at the technical level, at allied level. But once again, as we said earlier, I think we've set too many red lines to Ukraine, while Russia is not setting any red lines for itself.
Right, it puts us in a difficult position. Now, concerning Ukraine's integration into the European Union, is it on track? Is it going to take a decade? Is it going to take more? Based on the current picture, where we're at right now, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, to be blunt, I mean, it doesn't only depend on us, it depends on Ukrainians. First, I want to say Ukraine is a European country. It's part of the European family. And I was on the Maidan Square during the Revolution of Dignity in 2014. It was an incredibly moving moment, very powerful moment, where first time in history, you had young people being targeted, being shot at because they were brandishing the European flag, which for them was the promise of a better future, of a democratic and free future. The European process means reforming the rule of law, an independent judiciary, fighting corruption. This is what Ukrainians have been fighting for. And so we have a responsibility to accompany them in this process. Sometimes I'm asked, what's the date? What's the end game? When you get to the end of the process, but we will be there to help our Ukrainian friends, to accompany them in this process.
President Zelensky just recently went to the UN General Assembly in New York, and he was also pushing his four-point victory plan. But he also, President Zelensky, he's looking for a just peace at the end of the day, whatever this may mean, but something that's lasting. If Ukraine sits down and negotiates with Russia, if they're able to come up with some kind of agreement to stop and end the war, would it be then appropriate to invite Ukraine to NATO, to give them that long-lasting security guarantee?
Yes, I do think so. I think that we will have a responsibility to build really credible long-term security guarantees for Ukraine, which will ensure stability, deterrence on the eastern flank of NATO. And I would add, as some of my colleagues did this morning on the panel, that Ukrainians have proven their courage, their ability. They will be, I think, a strong value added for the alliance and for the collective security. So yes, I do think that Ukraine down the road should be able to join NATO.
Is that the only way that we can prevent a similar situation like we had with the Budapest Memorandum?
Well, I mean, clearly you're right to underscore that that's a precedent that we want to avoid. And I know that when I talk to my friends in Ukraine, they have very much this precedent in mind. Once again, we cannot accept a situation where we have a form of negotiation that's under a bad, that's imposed on Ukrainians, that we have something that's just a ceasefire, that's a break before another aggression, that gives time to Russia to rearm and prepare another aggression. So we will have to build a security architecture that's sustainable, that's lasting, and it gives credible security guarantees to Ukraine.
Do you think there's going to be the political will to do this within the European Union, at least?
But, once again, do we have a choice? Do we have a choice? Because this is our interest we're talking about. We're not supporting Ukraine out of generosity, of altruism. This is our security interest, as President Macron has laid out very clearly. And this is also, I would say, our economic interest. If tomorrow Russia were to control Ukraine, imagine the impact it would have on energy prices, on food prices. So this is something that we also have in mind.
All right, Benjamin Haddad, Minister for Europe from France, thank you very much for joining us today on TVP World.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And that's it from us here at the Warsaw Security Forum. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us for more on TVP World.